Let's go more on Washington's foreign policy moves. Talk to anti-war activist Brian Becker. Evening, Brian. Thanks for being with us. You must be crying into your boots, I guess, hearing that. Another 4 years of the US being the world policeman, as our correspondent there said. We are seeing a fresh push on several fronts by the US, even while some of those old burning issues like Afghanistan remain unresolved. How far is Washington from overextending itself?
Well, I think it's quite ironic that in Washington and in the media here, there's all this discussion about the fiscal cliff and how the United States is about to suffer an economic catastrophe because of budget shortfalls. And at the same time, you can see the Obama administration pursuing a policy of continuity is beefing up all of the money, sending all of the money, the arms, the new instruments for warfare. And so the cost of the empire is very great. Of course, it's not great for the corporations. They're making money hand over fist, but it's very costly for the American people who are having tens of thousands, really hundreds of thousands of public sector workers laid off and seeing very deep social service cuts. Say what?
Why aren't they jumping up and down about it in protest then?
Well, that's the thing. The people just voted for Obama, again, thinking that there would be an era of peace, something better than Mitt Romney, something better than the ultra-militarism of the Republican Party. But you see that there's a very fine line between ultra-militarism and militarism in the United States. The American people, of course, I think will go into the streets because when they realize that Social Security is on the chopping block, Medicare, education, vital social programs, and contrast that with endless money for arms, I think you'll see big protests, and I think they'll actually start on Inauguration Day.
I want to talk for a minute about that incident that's reported to have happened last week. Some observers now comparing that last week's Iranian shooting at a US drone to the notorious Gulf of Tonkin incident, the thing that sparked the US war in Vietnam. Are there any parallels there, do you think?
No, I think in 1964, the United States created a pretext, the Gulf of Tonkin, which we know later to be a lie, a fabrication, as if the United States was the victim of aggression from North Vietnam, because the Johnson administration had decided at that point that they were going to go in with hundreds of thousands of American troops. I don't think the U.S. government is ready to do that in the case of Iran. The fact that they concealed it before the election shows that the American people, war-weary as they are after endless wars in the last decade, would be very unsatisfied and alarmed about the possibility of a new conflict with Iran. I think that's why the Obama administration concealed it.
Well, the elections...
But it is interesting that they're acting as if Iran is insubordinate for firing back at planes that overfly its airspace. That's amazing.
So what next for Iran? And the election's out of the way. The long-standing question over whether Iran or not is pursuing nuclear weapons continues. Obama's presumably now in a stronger position to take preemptive action as he's back again. But Washington's so far been reluctant to support those Israeli calls. What would it take for the US to change its position?
I think the United States is not looking for a military strike against Iran. They're trying to impose are imposing severe economic sanctions with the hope that the Iranian people, having suffered so much economically from inflation, unemployment, will do, as some of them did in 1953, become the human material for a CIA-backed coup d'etat against the existing government. In other words, the real plan of the United States is to impose so much pressure on Iran economically, coupled with military threats, that ultimately they can destabilize the Iranian economy and use forces like the Green Movement in 2009 to create a political opposition that may be more viable in the future. I think that's the real game plan for Washington.
Some thoughts now on Syria while we got you on the line, sir. Of course, another flashpoint issue. Again, there's been openly lukewarm interest only from Washington to get involved. President Assad on this very channel warning this weekend that foreign intervention would spark a global conflict if it happened. Would the US heed that warning, though?
No, I think what's going on is the Clinton State Department, under the direction of President Obama, coordinated carefully with Prime Minister Cameron, the British Prime Minister, to announce the possibility of a sanctuary or safe zone, as they call it, inside of Syria. That, of course, would be the first step, the next step towards a more direct military intervention. I think the British and the American government are determined to overthrow Assad if the tenacity of the government, as it's proven to be successful so far, continues, I think we'll see more and more of a tendency for direct intervention, military intervention by Washington, even though they dread really the possible consequences of it. I think it's kind of the logic of empire. The empire can't allow a small independent government to survive when they've told them you must fall.
I can't resist asking you this last one, but we've got to be brief, I'm being told. In an infamous open mic incident, we all remember it, Obama last year, earlier on this year, in fact, March, wasn't it, promised Dmitry Medvedev that the US, after the US election, he was going to be much more flexible in resolving the European missile defence row. He said, I'll take this information back to Vlad. Can Washington be expected to walk the talk, though? You know, is it going to happen?
No, I don't think so. I think we can see even now that the agreement with the Polish government to station U.S. military personnel there, and going ahead with the creation of a missile defense shield, which cannot be perceived in any other way by the Russian government as a threat, as a direct threat against Russia. Also partly just to solidify and incorporate Poland into an American sphere of influence on Russia's border. I think this says a lot about the Obama administration playing the game of the military-industrial complex, which has a lot to gain economically and politically in terms of its own positioning in American politics by creating a new kind of Cold War atmosphere with Russia. And that's what the missile defense shield is all about, in addition to being very good for business. They've spent $100 billion so far on missile defense shield.
Brian, thank you. Brian Becker there, live from the US Capitol, anti-war activist. Thank you.